This is the video for lesson 7.2, features of quadratics. I'm not going to appear in this one. It's more important that you can actually see what's going on with the graphs here. So just focus on the screen and I'll obviously use the pointer so you can see what's going on here. So we're talking about features of quadratics here. First of all, let's make sure we know what a quadratic is. So a quadratic is an expression where the highest power is 2. So in other words, something that has x squared as its highest power. So something like x squared plus 2x plus 8. If you had something like x squared plus x cubed, then that wouldn't be a quadratic because the highest power would be x cubed, which is actually 3. But when we have x squared as our highest power, it makes this nice little U shape here, which this word here, often if students haven't seen it before, will say parabola, but it's actually pronounced parabola. So that's the curve that we get here. I like to refer to it as the U shape as well, just so we get that visual image of what this actually looks like. And if you actually graph something like negative x squared, then actually it just turns this graph upside down, and it would be an upside down U shape. Some of the important vocabulary for this and some features that we need to recognize from graphs. The blue dots represent where it crosses the x-axis, so those would be our x-intercepts. And when we use Desmos, we can obviously click on these and it will tell you exactly what they are. Notice that the y value is 0 for both of these points here, which is actually where we get one of our other names from. Sometimes they'll say x-intercepts, sometimes they'll say zeros, sometimes they'll say solutions, sometimes they'll say roots. So we have to be aware that all those things are exactly the same. Whichever of these words they ask for, they're just talking about an x-intercept, which we can get from the picture. Where it crosses the y-axis, that will obviously be your y-intercept. And notice for the y-intercept, actually, it's the x value that's 0, actually, this time. And the lowest point on the graph we would call the vertex, and you can see that that coordinate's there as well. On a graph, you just click it on Desmos, and it will give you these coordinates if necessary. Now, last lesson we did some work on factoring, and you could try and do the same method we did last lesson, but it won't actually work for this question. Like the GCF for the numbers 1, 3, and 4 would just be 1. They don't all have the same letter here, so we'd be in trouble straight away. From step 1 and 2, there is no GCF. So we need a slightly different method. Now, the method we're going to use is going to be all using the technology. So what we're going to do is we're going to graph the equation, we're going to look at the x-intercepts. So it's the same picture, I just highlighted the x-intercepts this time. So -4 and 1. Now to find the factors, all we have to do is we just do the opposite of what it says here, as in we change the sign. So if it says -4, I'm going to put +4. If it says +1, I'm going to put -1. And I'm going to put them both in parentheses. And remember, that's what the factoring's about. What two things do I multiply together to get this answer here? Now, it says at the bottom here, you could check your answer to this by graphing this and also graphing this and making sure it's the same graph. If it is, the graph will just change color as it draws the second line on top. Of course, what you could also do is you could draw yourself a little grid and actually work out the answer to this question as well. If you work this out and it comes to this, then you would also know that you have the right answer as well. And also a good way of reviewing that you can remember how to do that method for FOIL if necessary. Now, if you get the same question, but it gives you with a different letter, then it won't actually let you graph this immediately on Desmos. So do the same thing, but remember to change the b to an x. So just put x squared plus 3x minus 4. Take out your two numbers again, the x-intercepts, where it crosses the axis, and then do the opposites to find out what the factors are. But just remember at the end of the question, don't put x, put whatever the original letter was in this question. So b times b, I can see, would give me b squared. And particularly for the homework assignments, you've got to be careful with doing that, particularly if it's something that's an electronic reader. It won't give you the correct answer if you put x plus 4, x minus 1 for this question. Now, there are a couple of special cases when we do this. So on this question here, we had 2 answers. And most questions where we have an exponent of 2, we probably will get 2 answers, but we don't always get 2 answers. Sometimes we could just get 1 answer, like you can see here, where the answer is at 2. And actually, this is a special one. This is called a repeated root. So when we see the quadratic here, but we only have 1 answer, what we do is we actually write out the x-intercept down twice. So if this would have been 5, 0, I would have put 5 and 5. So I write it out twice, and then I do the opposites. Obviously, if I just put 2 and then put x minus 2, this would be a straight line graph. This would go through -2 on the y-axis, and then have a slope of 1. So it would look like this rather than this. So we put it twice. and then we can write out the factor twice as well. And sometimes we'll actually write this as x minus 2 squared, just because we're multiplying something by itself as well. And that's another thing to keep an eye out for in those questions. And this question here, we have two answers this time, so we're back to our normal situation here. So 0 and 3. So do the opposites. Technically, the opposite of 0 is negative 0. The opposite of 3 is negative 3. Now, if you try and work this out, any number take away 0 is just a number. Like 2 take away 0 is 2. 5 take away 0 is 5. So x take away 0 would just be x. So as we write our answer, we're actually just going to put x and x minus 3. And that's kind of a special one to keep an eye out for. When we have the intercept of 0, you're just going to write out x. Notice I didn't put parentheses around it this time because it's only just one term. But certainly when you have two terms like this, you should put parentheses around it. Now this question actually you could do using the method from last lesson, because there is a common factor here. Like I can see that they both have an x. In terms of numbers, this one doesn't have a number. So actually the GCF for this whole question would just be x. Take the question and divide by the GCF. X squared divided by x. If necessary, remember you can put the little exponent of 1 in here. So 2 take away 1 is 1. And x to the power of 1 is just x, so I would leave it like that. I have negative 3 here, so I'm going to write negative 3. And the x's actually would cancel. And that's actually the same answer that we had on the previous page. And possibly it might be a little easier to do it this way as well. So sometimes we can use this method, but certainly for this question, notice by looking at the x-intercepts, you can do the questions you did last lesson, along with the questions here where there's just one special term, one answer, sorry, and also the one where there's the two roots that you can see as well. So just a little bit of an advantage in possibly knowing how to use it from Desmos. Just be aware you can also have questions where they might not even give you the picture. They might actually just give you this as the question. There are x-intercepts of 0 and 3. Write down the quadratic equation that shows that. And same thing, you could just write down the opposites here, x minus 3. If necessary, they might actually ask you to multiply this out using the method from last unit. X times x is x squared. X times negative 3 is negative 3x. Or if they want to go a little bit more complicated still, they could do it with this question here, give you these two numbers and ask you what is the equation. So you could find the factors first, and then you can draw the grid like we talked about earlier to show that this does equal that. So a few different things there, quite a few different vocabulary words. Try and familiarize yourself with those, but a very important concept of looking for the x-intercept and then using that to actually find out what the factors of a question would be.